The divorce papers hit the kitchen table like a death sentence. Liana Anderson stared at her name printed in cold legal text, then up at the man she'd loved for 8 years, and saw nothing but contempt in his eyes. "Sign it," Daniel Laszlo said, checking his Rolex like she was wasting his valuable time. "My lawyer says if you cooperate, this can be done in 3 weeks. You get the Toyota and 20,000. I keep the house, the business, everything else."
$22,000.
For 8 years of marriage. For the business she'd helped him build when he was drowning in debt. For the home she'd decorated with her own hands. The garden she'd planted. The life she'd carefully constructed while he climbed the ladder she'd built for him. "The house is in my name too," Liana managed, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "I put down half the down payment from my mother's." "Your mother's life insurance, I know. You've mentioned it 1,000 times." Daniel's lip curled. "Consider the last 8 years' rent. You've been living above your station anyway. This house is worth $1.2 million now. You think you could afford the mortgage without me?" "Hey everyone, welcome back. I know you can feel the tension already, and trust me, it only gets more intense from here. Before we dive deeper into Liana's story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because this story is going to take you on a journey of betrayal, hidden power, and the sweetest justice you've ever witnessed. You're not going to want to miss a single minute. Now, let's get back to that kitchen where everything is about to shatter. "Daniel, please." Liana stood, her hands shaking. "Can we just talk about this? Whatever I did to make you unhappy, we can work on it. We can go to counseling, we can." "There's nothing to work on." He pulled out his phone, typed something, barely looking at her. "You're small, Liana. You always have been. Small dreams, small ambitions, small life. I thought you'd grow, evolve, become someone worthy of being my wife. But 8 years later, you're still the same basic woman I married." Each word was a knife expertly placed. "I have a business proposal I've been working on," she said quietly. "Something big. If you could just give me a few more weeks to—" "Weeks?" Daniel laughed, bitter and sharp. "You've had years, Liana. Years of me supporting you, funding your little hobbies, waiting for you to amount to something. And what do? Play around with proposals that go nowhere. Submit applications that get rejected. Waste my time and money on your delusions. The infrastructure proposal is different. The review board said, the review board says no every single time." He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and there was nothing but disdain in his gaze. "You're not cut out for big business, baby. You're a housewife, and not even a particularly good one. When's the last time you cooked a meal that didn't come from a box? When's the last time you looked in the mirror and saw what I see? You've let yourself go. Put on weight. Stop trying." Liana's hand instinctively went to her stomach. She'd gained 15 pounds in the past year, stress eating while working 18-hour days on the proposal. The proposal that could change everything. The proposal that— "I met someone," Daniel continued, "and there it was. The real reason. Someone who matches my energy, my vision. Someone who makes me excited to come home instead of dreading it. The affair she'd suspected but convinced herself she was paranoid about. The late nights he'd blamed on work. The distance she'd thought was just marriage settling into routine. How long?" Her voice cracked. "Does it matter?" He shrugged. "Sign the papers, Liana. Don't make this ugly. You're lucky I'm offering you anything at all. Technically, you haven't contributed financially to this marriage in years. I kept your books. managed your schedule, handled your clients when you were too busy, built the systems that let your company grow. Anyone could have done that. You're not special. Daniel grabbed his keys, headed for the door. I'm staying at a hotel until this is finalized. I want you out of the house by the end of the month. And Liana, he paused, delivering the final blow. Don't embarrass yourself by fighting this. You can't afford lawyers like mine. Just sign and disappear quietly. It's the one thing you're actually good at. Being invisible. The door slammed. Liana stood in the kitchen of the home she'd loved, holding divorce papers that said she was worth $20,000 and a used car, and felt the weight of 8 years crash down on her. She'd been invisible. He was right about that, but not in the way he thought. While Daniel had been busy building his ego and his mistress, Liana had been building something else entirely. Something he'd dismissed as another one of her little hobbies. Something he'd never even bothered to read when she tried to share it with him. The National Infrastructure Development Proposal. 3 years of research, hundreds of hours of work, partnerships with engineers and environmental specialists and urban planners who'd believed in her vision when no one else did. A $750 million contract to rebuild transportation systems in underserved communities across 6 states. She'd submitted the final proposal 4 weeks ago. The review board had promised a decision within 60 days. Daniel thought she was playing with delusions. He had no idea she was building an empire. Her phone buzzed on the counter. An email from the National Development Commission. Her hands shook as she opened it. Subject: Urgent NDA required for final review. Infrastructure Proposal L. Anderson, Ms. Anderson, your proposal has advanced to final review. We require an in-person presentation to the Commission Board and the Secretary of Development next week. Due to the scope and national security implications of this project, all participants must sign the attached NDA immediately. Preliminary approval has been granted pending your presentation. Congratulations. Of the 847 proposals submitted, yours was one of 3 selected for final consideration and the only one recommended for full funding. Please confirm your attendance within 24 hours. Liana read it 3 times, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Final review. Preliminary approval. Full funding. She looked at the divorce papers on the table, then back at the email that said she was 72 hours away from potentially securing $750 million. Daniel wanted her to disappear quietly. She'd do exactly that. But when she reappeared, it would be as someone he could never diminish again. Liana picked up a pen, signed the divorce papers with steady hands, and texted Daniel's lawyer that he could pick them up in the morning. Then she opened her laptop and began preparing the presentation that would change her life. Outside, thunder rumbled. Rain started to fall, washing the world clean. Inside, Liana Anderson was done being small. She was about to become monumental. And the man who'd thrown her away was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Some mistakes cost money. Others cost destiny. Daniel was about to pay both prices. The apartment Liana moved into was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a neighborhood Daniel would have called beneath him. 600 square feet, outdated fixtures, a view of a brick wall. She'd found it on Craigslist, paid first and last month's rent with money from her savings account Daniel didn't know existed, and moved her essentials in 2 trips. Everything she owned that mattered fit in the back of her Toyota. That should have felt devastating. Instead, it felt like freedom. Girl, I'm going to kill him. Samantha Bradley stood in the middle of the tiny living room, hands on her hips, surveying the space with the critical eye of someone who'd been Liana's best friend since college. She was everything Liana wasn't. Loud, confrontational, a corporate attorney who'd built a reputation destroying men exactly like Daniel in courtrooms across the state. "Don't," Liana said, unpacking books onto a second-hand shelf. "He's not worth it. He threw you out of your own house, gave you $20,000 for 8 years of marriage, is flaunting his mistress all over social media." Sam held up her phone, showing Daniel's Instagram. He'd posted a photo 2 hours ago. Him and a woman Liana didn't recognize at an expensive restaurant. Caption reading, "New beginnings with my queen." The woman was young, mid-20s maybe, Instagram perfect with platinum hair, designer everything, and a smile that screamed I won. "Her name is Vanessa Corleone," Sam said. "I did some digging. She's a so-called social media influencer. 200,000 followers, most of them bought. She sells a lifestyle coaching program that's basically a pyramid scheme. And get this, she's been sued 3 times for fraud." "Daniel doesn't know that," Liana said quietly. "Daniel doesn't know anything. He's thinking with his ego and his dick." Sam tossed her phone aside. "But forget him. Tell me about the presentation. Are you ready?" Liana sank onto the futon that served as her new couch. "I don't know. The proposal is solid. I've checked it 1,000 times. But presenting to the Secretary of Development and the full commission board? Sam, these are people who've built nations. Who am I? You're Liana Anderson. You have a master's degree in civil engineering that you earned while working full-time. You've designed systems that have been implemented in 4 cities. You spent 3 years researching this proposal with some of the best minds in the field." Sam sat beside her. "And more importantly, you're the woman who survived 8 years married to a narcissist and came out the other side with your brilliance intact." "I don't feel brilliant. I feel terrified." "Good. That means you care." Sam squeezed her hand. "You know what Daniel's biggest mistake was? He never actually looked at you, never saw what you were capable of. He needed you small so he could feel big." The words hit home because they were true. Liana had met Daniel 9 years ago at a networking event. She'd been 25, freshly graduated with her master's, full of ideas and ambition. He'd been 28, charming, confident, running a small consulting firm that was barely profitable. He'd swept her off her feet with grand visions and bigger promises. She'd believed in him, believed in them. For the first 2 years, they'd been partners. She'd helped him restructure his business, streamline operations, land bigger clients. He'd encouraged her career, celebrated her successes, made her feel valued. Then something shifted. As his business grew, as money started flowing, as important people started knowing his name, he'd started looking at her differently. Like she was a reflection that didn't shine bright enough. Like her accomplishments diminished his somehow. The encouragement turned to criticism. The celebrations turned to dismissals. Her master's degree became something he'd funded even though she'd paid for it herself with scholarships and student loans. Her job became a hobby he allowed her to keep. Slowly, methodically, he'd made her smaller. And she'd let him because she'd loved him. Because she'd thought marriage meant sacrifice. Because her mother had died when she was 22, and her father had checked out emotionally years before that, and Daniel was the only family she had left. Until he wasn't. "I wasted 8 years," Liana whispered. "No." Sam's voice was firm. "You invested 8 years in becoming someone who could survive this. Someone who could build a $750 million proposal while her husband told her she was nothing. That's not weakness, Liana. That's steel. A knock on the door interrupted them. Liana opened it to find a man in his late 50s, black, with silver-threaded hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, but something about his presence commanded respect. "Dr. Palmer," Liana breathed. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. I was in the neighborhood." James Palmer, former Secretary of Transportation and the mentor who'd believed in her vision when it was just scattered notes and impossible dreams, smiled gently. "May I come in?" They settled around her tiny kitchen table, coffee in mismatched mugs, while Dr. Palmer reviewed her presentation materials. "This is excellent work, Liana," he said finally. "But I'm not here to critique your proposal. I'm here to make sure you're ready for what comes next." "The presentation?" "Everything after." He set down his reading glasses. "If you win this contract, and I believe you will, your life changes overnight. $750 million. National attention. Every news outlet will want your story. Every competitor will scrutinize your work. Every person you've ever known will suddenly resurface, including Daniel," Liana thought. "Can I ask you something personal?" Dr. Palmer's voice gentled. "The divorce. Are you okay?" Sam made an indignant noise, but Liana held up a hand. "I'm getting there," she said honestly. 8 years is a long time to give someone, to believe in someone, to love someone who it turns out never really saw you. "He saw you," Dr. Palmer corrected. "He just chose not to value what he saw. There's a difference." He leaned forward. "I've been in this industry for 40 years. I've seen brilliant people destroy themselves trying to prove they matter to people who will never appreciate them. Don't let your ex-husband be the measuring stick for your worth." "I won't," Liana said, and meant it. "Good. Because when you walk into that boardroom next week, I need you believing what I believe, that you're the most qualified person to execute this project. Not despite your background. Because of it." His eyes held hers. "You grew up in subsidized housing. You know what it's like when infrastructure fails, when buses don't come, when communities are isolated by design. That's not a weakness. That's your superpower." Liana's throat tightened. She'd never told Daniel about growing up poor, about the nights her mother worked 3 jobs, about the scholarship that saved her life. He'd assumed she came from money because she carried herself with dignity. She'd never corrected him because he made poverty sound like a character flaw. "The board knows your background," Dr. Palmer continued. "I made sure of it, because it matters. This contract isn't just about building roads and bridges. It's about building access, opportunity, hope. You understand that in your bones. That's why you're going to win." After Dr. Palmer left, Sam looked at Liana with tears in her eyes. "You've been hiding so much light," she said, "dimming yourself for someone who didn't deserve to see it. Promise me you're done with that." "I promise," Liana said. That night, alone in her tiny apartment, Liana stood at the window looking at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably with Vanessa, celebrating his freedom, convinced he'd traded up. He had no idea what he'd thrown away, but he would. In 6 days, Liana would walk into that boardroom and present the work of her lifetime. And depending on how it went, she'd either return to this apartment and rebuild quietly, or she'd emerge as something Daniel's small mind could never have imagined. Either way, she was done being invisible. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Unknown. Hi, this is Vanessa. I know this is weird, but I wanted to reach out woman to woman. Daniel told me about the divorce. I hope there's no hard feelings. He and I didn't start anything until after you two were already having problems. I'm not a homewrecker. Just wanted you to know that. Liana stared at the message, 1,000 responses flooding her mind. But in the end, she simply blocked the number. Some conversations weren't worth having. Some people weren't worth educating. And some victories were won by simply walking away and becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Liana returned to her presentation prep, her focus laser sharp. Daniel thought she was forgettable. Vanessa thought she was already forgotten. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment, and like this video. The National Development Commission building was all glass and marble and power, the kind of place that made even confident people feel small. Liana stood in the lobby, clutching her presentation materials, wearing the one good suit she owned. Navy blue, 3 years old, bought for a job interview that had led nowhere. She'd paired it with her mother's pearl earrings, the only jewelry she'd kept when she'd packed up her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sam, "You're going to kill this. Call me the second you're done." Another from Dr. Palmer. "Remember, you belong here. They need you more than you need them." Nothing from Daniel. Not that she'd expected anything. According to his Instagram, which she'd looked at once in a moment of weakness, he was in the Bahamas with Vanessa. Some last-minute getaway. Her posts were full of champagne and infinity pools and captions about living your best life. Good for them, Liana thought, and meant it. She was done being bitter. Bitterness was just another way to stay small. "Ms. Anderson?" A young woman in a crisp suit approached, professional smile in place. "The commission is ready for you. If you'll follow me." The boardroom was on the 15th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Capitol. 12 people sat around a massive table, and every single one of them looked like they could buy and sell her entire life without blinking. At the head of the table sat Secretary Vivian Cross, a woman whose reputation preceded her. 65, black, brilliant, and known for suffering fools exactly never. She'd built her career on transforming impossible projects into national landmarks. "Ms. Anderson." Secretary Cross's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "Please, begin." Liana set up her presentation, her hands steady despite her racing heart. And then she did something that surprised even herself. She closed the laptop. "Before I show you the technical specifications and financial projections, I need to tell you why this matters." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "I grew up in subsidized housing on the south side of Detroit. My mother worked 3 jobs because the bus system was so unreliable she needed a car she couldn't afford to maintain. I watched her sacrifice her health, her dreams, her life to a transportation system that treated poor communities like afterthoughts." Secretary Cross leaned forward slightly, interested. "When I was 15, my mother missed a job interview that could have changed our lives because the bus broke down. Again. She cried that night, not because she was weak, but because she was tired. Tired of a system designed to keep her struggling." Liana's voice strengthened. "She died when I was 22. Aneurysm. The doctor said stress was a major factor. She was 47 years old. The room was silent. This proposal isn't about roads and bridges. It's about dignity. It's about designing infrastructure that says to every person in underserved communities, you matter. Your time matters. Your access to opportunity matters." Liana opened her laptop now. "So yes, I'm going to show you how this project will create 15,000 jobs. generate $2.3 billion in economic activity, and reduce carbon emissions by 30%. But what I really want you to understand is this. I'm not proposing this project because I think it's good policy. I'm proposing it because I know what it's like to live in the communities we're talking about. And I'm proposing it because no one should have to watch their mother cry over a broken bus system. She presented for 45 minutes, showed them the engineering specifications, the environmental impact studies, the financial models that proved this wasn't just morally right but economically sound. Answered every question with precision and passion. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then Secretary Cross spoke. In my 30 years doing this work, I've reviewed thousands of proposals. Most are technically competent but soulless. Some have heart but lack rigor. She stood, walking to the window. Yours is the first I've seen that has both. The engineering is flawless. The financial planning is conservative but achievable. And the vision. She turned back to Liana. The vision is exactly what this country needs. Liana's heart stopped. The commission has voted. Pending final contract negotiations, we're awarding you the full $750 million for the National Infrastructure Redevelopment Initiative. Secretary Cross smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional exterior. Congratulations, Ms. Anderson. You just won the largest single infrastructure contract awarded to an independent firm in the last decade. The words didn't feel real. $750 million. The largest contract in a decade. Liana Anderson, who 6 days ago had been told she was small and ambitionless and lucky anyone had married her at all. Her voice cracked. Thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Secretary Cross extended her hand. Welcome to the big leagues. The next hour was a blur of handshakes and congratulations and lawyers explaining contract terms and NDAs and media protocols. The official announcement would come in 2 weeks, giving Liana time to set up her corporate structure and prepare for the spotlight. Dr. Palmer found her in the hallway afterward, pulled her into a fierce hug. I knew it, he said. I knew from the moment you first pitched this idea 3 years ago. You're going to change lives, Liana. She cried then, finally, all the stress and fear and hope pouring out. My ex-husband thought I was nothing, she whispered. He threw me away like trash. Then he's an idiot, Dr. Palmer said simply. And sometime soon, he's going to realize he threw away a queen. Liana drove home in a daze, pulled into the parking lot of her tiny apartment building and sat in her car, staring at nothing. $750 million. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over Daniel's contact. She could text him, call him, tell him what he'd missed by being too blind to see her. But what would that prove? That she needed his validation? That his opinion still mattered? She deleted his contact instead. Then she called Sam, who screamed so loud Liana had to pull the phone away from her ear.
I'm buying champagne.
The expensive kind. I'm coming over right now. We're celebrating. Sam, it's Tuesday. Don't you have work? I'm a partner. I'll bill it to someone. This is happening. An hour later, they sat on Liana's futon drinking champagne from coffee mugs because she didn't own proper glasses, laughing until they cried. What are you going to do first? Sam asked. Once the money hits? Liana thought about the house Daniel had kicked her out of, the home she'd loved, the garden she'd planted. I'm going to buy it, she said. The house. I'm going to buy it from Daniel. To live in.
No.
A plan was forming, crystallizing. To turn into something that actually matters. A resource center for women. job training, financial literacy, legal help. Everything women need to leave bad situations and build better lives. She looked at Sam. I'm going to name it after my mother. The Margaret Anderson Center. Sam's eyes filled with tears. That's perfect. And I'm going to offer Daniel exactly what he offered me.
$22,000.
Take it or leave it. He'll never sell. That house is worth over $1 million. He will, Liana said quietly, because by the time I make the offer, he's not going to have a choice. Her phone buzzed. An email from the Commission's Media Relations team. Ms. Anderson, we need to schedule your official photo and biography for the press release. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Also, Secretary Cross has requested you join her for a profile piece in the National Journal. This will be a major feature. Congratulations again. Liana stared at the email. National Journal. Official photos. Press releases. In 2 weeks, her face would be everywhere. Her story would be public. Daniel would know. Daniel would know. The thought should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it just made her tired. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. Wanted to build something meaningful and move forward with her life. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Because at that exact moment, 500 miles away in the Bahamas, Daniel was proposing to Vanessa with a ring he'd bought on credit. And Vanessa was saying yes while mentally calculating how much she could drain from his accounts before moving on to her next mark. And tomorrow, Daniel's biggest client would pull their contract, unhappy with his recent distracted work. And the following week, the IRS would flag his business for an audit based on irregularities in his tax filings. And in 2 weeks, he would see Liana's face on the cover of the National Journal with the headline, From Invisible to Indispensable. How Liana Anderson won the contract that will transform America. The collision course was set. Liana just didn't know it yet. She was too busy planning her future to worry about the past. And that, more than anything, was about to drive Daniel absolutely insane. Daniel returned from the Bahamas with a fiancée, a drained bank account, and a growing sense that something was off. The first sign came when he pulled into the driveway of the house he'd kept in the divorce. Vanessa wrinkled her nose at the colonial-style home that had seemed impressive 3 weeks ago. "This is it?" she said, scrolling through her phone. "Babe, I thought you said it was a mansion." "It's 3,200 square feet in a prime neighborhood," Daniel defended. "4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, recently renovated kitchen. Vanessa's attention was already elsewhere, photographing herself in the car's side mirror. "I guess we can work with it until we upgrade. My followers expect a certain aesthetic." Daniel carried the luggage inside, trying to ignore the irritation creeping up his spine. The Bahamas trip had cost him $18,000, most of it on Vanessa's credit card because she'd insisted on the best of everything. The ring had been another $12,000. He'd planned to pay it off with his quarterly bonus, but his accountant had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails while he was away. He called back. "Daniel, we have a problem," Marcus Chun said without preamble. Hexagon pulled their contract. Daniel's stomach dropped. Hexagon Technologies was his biggest client, responsible for 40% of his annual revenue. "What? Why?" "They said the last 2 reports you delivered were substandard. Missing data, sloppy analysis. They gave you 3 chances to correct it, but you never responded to their emails." Because he'd been too busy with Vanessa to check his work email properly. Too distracted by his new relationship to focus on the details Liana used to handle. Liana, who'd managed his client communications. who'd proofread every report, who'd caught the mistakes he was too arrogant to look for. "I can fix this," Daniel said. "I'll call them, explain. They've already hired your competitor. It's done." Marcus paused. "There's something else. The IRS is auditing your last 3 years of tax returns. Apparently there are some irregularities in how you classified certain expenses." The room spun. "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that could result in significant penalties if they're deemed intentional. I need you to send me every receipt, every invoice, every piece of documentation for the past 3 years. Immediately." After the call ended, Daniel sat in his home office, trying to remember where those documents were. Liana had always organized the files, had a system he'd never bothered to learn. He'd thrown out boxes of paperwork when she'd moved out, assuming it was just old household bills. What if he'd thrown out the tax documents? "Babe!" Vanessa's voice echoed through the house. "The master closet is tiny. I need you to clean out your stuff so I have room for my things. And we need to talk about redecorating. This whole vibe is very divorced dad. We need to make it Instagram worthy." Daniel closed his eyes, breathing through his nose. This was fine. This was just a rough patch. Every business had setbacks. Every relationship had adjustments. He was Daniel Laszlo. He always landed on his feet. Across town, Liana was signing the lease for her new office space. It was modest, just 1,200 square feet in a converted warehouse building, but it had good light and room to grow. The landlord had given her a curious look when she'd paid the entire year's rent upfront in cash, but he'd taken the money without questions. Sam helped her move in used furniture and set up a basic workspace. "You know you could afford something way nicer, right?" Sam said, assembling a desk. "You're about to have access to hundreds of millions of dollars. The contract money is for the project, not for me," Liana corrected. "My firm gets paid from the management fees, which will be substantial, but I'm not touching that until everything is properly structured." She hung up her engineering degree on the wall. "Besides, I like this space. It feels real. It feels like a startup." "That's because it is one." Liana smiled. "Anderson Infrastructure Development. We're going to do this right, Sam. Every dollar accounted for. Every decision transparent. I'm not giving anyone a reason to question whether I deserve this." Dr. Palmer arrived with lunch, spreading takeout containers across the new desk. "I have news," he said. "The National Journal wants to move up your profile piece. They want to coincide it with the official announcement next week instead of waiting for the original timeline." Liana's stomach fluttered. "Next week? That's only 7 days away. The editor thinks your story is exactly what the country needs right now. Woman from humble beginnings wins massive contract through innovation and determination. It's good press for the commission and inspiring for everyone else." He handed her a list of interview questions. "They'll want to talk about your background, your education, your inspiration for the project. What about my personal life? They'll ask. You can decline to answer, but they'll dig anyway. It's what journalists do." Dr. Palmer's expression was kind. "Is there anything in your personal life you're worried about?" Liana thought about Daniel, about the divorce that was barely final, about how small he'd made her feel. "My ex-husband," she said quietly. "He divorced me 3 weeks ago, told me I was nothing, kicked me out of our house." She met Dr. Palmer's eyes. "When this news breaks, he's going to know what he threw away, and part of me wants him to suffer for it. But another part of me just wants to move forward and forget he exists." Both of those feelings are valid, Dr. Palmer said. But here's what I've learned in my 70 years. The best revenge is indifference, not cruelty, not rubbing his face in your success, just genuinely not caring what he thinks anymore. I'm working on it. I know you are. He squeezed her shoulder. And for what it's worth, any man who couldn't see your value doesn't deserve a second of your emotional energy. The interview was scheduled for 3 days later. Liana spent the time preparing, rehearsing answers, trying to figure out how to tell her story without sounding bitter or vengeful. When the journalist arrived, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Kane, Liana was ready. Most of the questions were straightforward. Her education, her career path, the inspiration for the proposal, her vision for the project's implementation. Then Patricia asked, "You're recently divorced. Did your ex-husband support your work on this proposal?" Liana chose her words carefully. "My ex-husband and I had different visions for our futures. The divorce was his choice and I respect it. This proposal was my own work, developed over 3 years with support from mentors and colleagues in the field. Sources tell me the divorce was finalized less than a month ago. That must have been difficult timing." "It was challenging," Liana admitted, "but it also clarified something important. I don't need anyone's permission to be ambitious. I don't need validation from people who can't see my worth. I just need to do the work and trust that it speaks for itself." Patricia smiled. "That's a powerful statement. Do you have a message for other women who might be in similar situations? Feeling dismissed or underestimated?" Liana thought about her mother, about every woman who'd been told she was too much or not enough, about every person who'd been made to feel small by someone who should have built them up. Stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Stop waiting for permission to pursue your dreams. And stop believing people who tell you you're not capable of extraordinary things. Her voice strengthened. "You are the expert on your own potential. Trust yourself. Do the work. And let your results speak louder than anyone's doubts." The interview wrapped up 2 hours later. Patricia shook her hand warmly. "This is going to be a beautiful piece," she said. "Your story is exactly what people need to hear right now." After she left, Sam looked at Liana with tears in her eyes. "That thing you said about not shrinking yourself? I needed to hear that too." She pulled Liana into a hug. "You're not the same woman who moved into that apartment 3 weeks ago. You're standing taller, speaking louder, taking up space. I'm trying. You're succeeding." That night, Liana couldn't sleep. She pulled out her laptop and searched Daniel's name, a habit she was trying to break. His business website looked the same. His Instagram showed him and Vanessa at expensive restaurants, posting couple photos with captions about power couples and building empires together. Vanessa had changed her bio to include, "Engaged to my king. Building our dynasty. DM for lifestyle coaching." Liana closed the browser, disgusted with herself for looking. He didn't matter anymore. His opinion didn't matter. His life didn't matter to hers. But old habits died hard. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Liana Anderson?" A male voice, professional. "Yes. This is Robert Chun from Sterling Properties. I'm calling regarding 2847 Maple Grove Lane. Our client is interested in selling and wanted to gauge your potential interest in purchasing." Liana's breath caught. That was her old address. The house Daniel had kept in the divorce. "Why would your client think I'm interested?" "Honestly, he didn't mention you specifically. But I did some research on potential buyers, and given your previous ownership and the property's history, I thought it was worth a call." He paused. "Between us, I think the seller is facing some financial pressure. He's asking $1.2 million, but I suspect he'd take significantly less for a quick, cash sale." Liana's mind raced. She didn't have that kind of cash yet. Wouldn't until the contract was signed and the first payment processed. But if Daniel was desperate enough to sell, what kind of timeline is he looking at? Ideally within the next 60 days. The faster, the better. "I'll think about it," Liana said. "Can you send me the listing details?" After hanging up, she sat in the dark apartment, thinking. Daniel was selling, which meant his financial situation was worse than his Instagram suggested, which meant the universe was already handling him without her intervention. She didn't need to do anything except wait. In 7 days, her face would be on the cover of the National Journal. In 7 days, Daniel would know. And in 7 days, his carefully constructed new life would start to crumble in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Because while Daniel had been building an Instagram facade, Liana had been building an empire. And empires, unlike Instagram posts, were real. Hey fam, if you're enjoying the story so far, please hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next twist. The National Journal hit newsstands on a Thursday morning. Liana woke to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The cover photo showed her in the office space, wearing jeans and a white button-down, holding architectural plans, looking confident and competent and nothing like the small woman Daniel had dismissed. The headline ran in bold letters, "From invisible to indispensable. How Liana Anderson won the $750 million contract that will transform America." Sam had texted a photo of herself holding the magazine in a bookstore. "You're famous. I'm crying in public. Call me. Dr. Palmer. Congratulations." The phone hasn't stopped ringing. "This is bigger than we anticipated. Prepare yourself." Her mother's best friend from Detroit, who she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. "Your mama would be so proud. I'm buying 10 copies. And then, at 9:47 a.m., a text from a number she deleted but still recognized. "Daniel. Daniel, we need to talk. Call me immediately." She deleted it without responding. 3 minutes later, another, "Liana, I know you're seeing these messages. This is important. Please call me." Then, "I saw the article. I had no idea you were working on something this big. We should discuss this." Liana turned off her phone. Daniel had seen the magazine at a gas station while filling up his BMW. He'd been heading to meet with his accountant about the IRS audit when Liana's face had stopped him cold. At first, he'd thought it was someone who looked like her. His plain, unremarkable ex-wife couldn't possibly be on the cover of the National Journal. But it was her. And the headline made his vision blur. $750 million. $750 million. He'd bought the magazine with shaking hands, read the article twice in his car, certain there was some mistake. But there was no mistake. Liana Anderson, his ex-wife, the woman he'd called small and ambitionless, had won the largest infrastructure contract awarded to an independent firm in a decade. The article detailed her 3 years of research, her master's degree in civil engineering he'd completely forgotten about, her collaboration with top engineers and urban planners, her vision for transforming transportation in underserved communities. There were quotes from Secretary Vivian Cross. "Ms. Anderson's proposal was the most comprehensive and innovative we've reviewed in my 30 years of public service." From Dr. James Palmer, Liana is exactly the kind of visionary this country needs. She doesn't just understand the technical aspects. She understands the human cost of failed infrastructure. And from Liana herself, the quote that made Daniel's hands go numb: "I don't need anyone's permission to be ambitious. I don't need validation from people who can't see my worth. I just need to do the work and trust that it speaks for itself." People who can't see my worth. She was talking about him. The article mentioned her recent divorce in passing, noting that she developed the proposal while navigating personal challenges. It didn't name Daniel, but anyone who knew them would connect the dots. He'd divorced her 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. And 1 week later, she'd won $750 million. Daniel sat in his car in the gas station parking lot, doing math that made him sick. If they'd still been married, that money would have been joint marital property. He would have had legal claim to a portion of the company, the assets, everything. But he'd divorced her, thrown her out, given her $20,000 and thought he was being generous. The realization hit like a physical blow. He'd divorced a woman 1 week before she became a multimillionaire. His phone rang. "Vanessa. Babe, where are you? I thought you were taking me to brunch." "I'm busy," he said shortly. "Busy? Daniel, you promised. I already posted that we were going to the garden house. My followers are expecting content." "Your followers can wait." He hung up, ignoring her immediate callback. He tried calling Liana, straight to voicemail, texted her. No response. Drove to her old apartment building, the dingy walk-up she'd moved into after the divorce. Knocked on the door of Unit 3B. A young guy answered, confused. "Liana?" "Nah, man. She moved out like a week ago. Didn't leave a forwarding address." Of course she had. Why would a woman who just won $750 million stay in a 600-square-foot apartment? Daniel drove to his house, his mind racing with calculations and possibilities and the growing horror of what he'd done. Vanessa was waiting in the driveway, arms crossed, furious. "You hung up on me. Do you know how embarrassing that was? I had to tell my followers we'd reschedule. I have bigger problems than your Instagram content right now." "Excuse me?" Her eyes went cold. "What's more important than supporting your fiancé?" Daniel shoved past her into the house, pulled up the National Journal article on his laptop, turned it to face her. That's what's more important." Vanessa looked at the screen, at Liana's face, at the headline. Her expression cycled through confusion, recognition, shock. "Wait, this is your ex-wife? The boring one you said had no ambition. I was wrong. She won $750 million? Vanessa's voice went shrill. "When did this happen?" "The contract was awarded 3 weeks ago, right after our divorce was finalized." Vanessa stared at him, and he watched the calculation happen in her eyes. The realization that he'd thrown away a fortune, that she'd hitched herself to the wrong horse. "You divorced a woman a week before she became rich." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I didn't know." "How could you not know? How could you be married to someone working on a $750 million proposal and not know about it?" "She never told me. She said she was working on some proposal, but she'd had dozens of proposals rejected before. I thought it was just another pipe dream." "So you didn't even ask? Didn't even look at what she was working on?" Vanessa laughed, bitter and sharp. "You're telling me you were so dismissive of your wife that you couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the biggest project of her life?" The truth of it made Daniel sick. He'd seen Liana working late into the night on her laptop, had heard her on phone calls with engineers and planners, had watched her spread documents across their dining room table, and he'd walked past it all without a single question, without any interest, because he'd decided years ago that nothing Liana did was important enough to matter. "I need to talk to her," Daniel said. "Need to explain." "Explain what?" Vanessa's voice dripped scorn. "That you're sorry for calling her nothing? That you didn't mean it when you kicked her out of her own house? That you want her back now that she's worth millions?" She grabbed her purse. "I'm going to my sister's." "Vanessa, wait." "For what?" "For you to keep obsessing over your ex-wife? For you to realize you made the biggest mistake of your life." She headed for the door, then paused. "You know what the worst part is? I actually feel bad for her, because you're about to make her life hell trying to get back what you threw away. And she deserves better than that." She left. Daniel stood alone in the house, surrounded by the silence Liana used to fill. His business was failing. His fiancée was disgusted with him. The IRS was auditing him. His biggest client was gone. And his ex-wife, the woman he'd called small and forgettable, was on the cover of a national magazine, having won a contract that would make her one of the most influential people in infrastructure development. He pulled out his phone, tried calling her again. Still no answer. So he did the only thing he could think of. He got in his car and drove to the National Development Commission building. Someone there would know how to reach her, would help him explain that this was all a misunderstanding, that he'd made a mistake, that they should talk about their options. He made it as far as the lobby before security stopped him. "I need to see Liana Anderson," he told the guard. "It's urgent. I'm her husband." "Ex-husband," a familiar voice corrected. Daniel turned to find Dr. James Palmer standing behind him, expression cold. "Dr. Palmer, I didn't realize you knew Liana. I've been her mentor for 3 years. Helped her develop the proposal you couldn't be bothered to read." Palmer's voice was sharp enough to draw blood. "She's not here. And even if she was, she has no interest in speaking with you. That's for her to decide. She already decided when she blocked your number." Palmer stepped closer. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Laszlo. Liana is about to enter a world you can't imagine. National press, international partnerships, influence and respect she's earned through brilliance and hard work. The last thing she needs is her ex-husband sniffing around now that she's valuable. I just want to talk to her."
No.
"You want to assuage your guilt. You want to feel less stupid for throwing away a queen." Palmer's eyes were hard. "You had 8 years to see her, to value her, to support her dreams. You chose to diminish her instead. Now you get to live with that choice." "I made a mistake." "Yes, you did. The kind of mistake you don't get to undo." Palmer headed for the elevator, then paused.
Do yourself a favor.
"Move on. Find someone else to use. Because Liana is done being your stepping stone." The elevator doors closed, leaving Daniel standing in a lobby that suddenly felt very cold. His phone buzzed. A text from his accountant. "Need to talk ASAP. IRS findings are worse than expected. Call me." Another from his bank. "Your business line of credit application has been denied." Another from Vanessa. "I'm keeping the ring. Consider it compensation for wasting my time." Daniel walked back to his car, the magazine with Liana's face still on the passenger seat, mocking him. He'd lost her, and he was just beginning to understand how much that was going to cost him. 3 weeks after the article published, Daniel's world was in freefall. The IRS audit revealed he'd been misclassifying personal expenses as business deductions for years. Penalties and back taxes totaled $180,000. Money he didn't have. His business account held $34,000, and that was before paying his remaining staff or covering office rent. Vanessa had cleaned out the joint account they'd opened for wedding expenses. $12,000 gone. Her Instagram showed her in Miami with a new man, a real estate developer whose watch probably cost more than Daniel's car. Her bio no longer mentioned him. She'd blocked his number. The house was hemorrhaging money. Without Liana's income, which he'd always dismissed as supplemental, the mortgage was crushing him. Property taxes were due. The roof needed repairs he'd been putting off. The real estate agent had been honest. In this market, even if he sold immediately, he'd barely break even after paying off the loan and closing costs. His remaining clients were leaving. Word had spread about the Hexagon disaster, about his declining quality of work. People who'd once returned his calls were suddenly too busy. Meetings were canceled. Proposals went unanswered. And everywhere he looked, he saw Liana's face. She'd been on 3 morning shows. NPR had done a feature. Forbes had named her one of their 30 under 30 to watch, even though she was 29. Her company, Anderson Infrastructure Development, had moved into a gleaming new office downtown. She'd hired a staff of 12, all top-tier engineers and project managers. The National Development Commission had released a video of her presenting at an infrastructure summit, and Daniel had watched it obsessively. She looked different, confident, powerful. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage, spoke with authority that commanded the room, smiled like someone who'd finally stepped into her destiny. She'd never smiled at him like that, not once in 8 years. Daniel sat in his home office at 2 a.m., drunk on cheap whiskey, scrolling through articles about his ex-wife's meteoric rise while his life collapsed around him. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered, desperate for anything. Daniel Laszlo? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. This is Jennifer Moss from Metropolitan Business Journal. I'm writing a piece about Liana Anderson's journey, and I'd love to get a quote from you as her ex-husband. How does it feel watching her achieve this level of success? His stomach turned. No comment. I understand this might be sensitive, but sources tell me the divorce was finalized just weeks before she won the contract. Some people are calling it the worst-timed divorce in history. Do you have any regrets? I said no comment. He hung up, hands shaking. The worst-timed divorce in history. That's what he'd become. A cautionare tale. The fool who threw away a fortune. Another call, 30 minutes later. Different reporter, same questions. Then another. By morning, he'd stopped answering his phone entirely. The article published 2 days later, the $750 million mistake. Inside the divorce that made headlines. It was devastating. They'd interviewed people from his industry who spoke anonymously about his reputation for taking credit for his wife's behind-the-scenes work. Former employees who mentioned how Liana had essentially run his operations while he'd taken clients to expensive lunches. Neighbors who'd witnessed him moving a much younger woman into his house within days of Liana moving out. And a single quote from Liana herself, when asked about her ex-husband. I wish him well. Our marriage taught me valuable lessons about my own worth. I'm grateful for the clarity. The professional dismissal was somehow worse than anger would have been. She'd moved on. Completely. He was already a footnote in her story. Daniel's remaining clients called after the article. 3 more cancellations. His office manager quit. apologizing but explaining she'd found a better opportunity. His lease was up for renewal and the landlord wanted double the current rent or he'd have to move. He couldn't afford either option. At night, he drove past Liana's new office building, watching the lights on the 10th floor where Anderson Infrastructure Development occupied the entire space. Sometimes he'd see her through the windows, animated in conversation with her team, laughing, thriving. He'd done this to her, made her feel small, invisible, worthless, and she'd become extraordinary anyway, not because of him, despite him. His mother called, having seen the articles. "I never liked how you treated that girl," she said bluntly. "She was sweet, smart. She helped you build everything you had. And you threw her away for some Instagram model." "Mom, I don't need—" "Yes, you do. You need to hear this. You were cruel, Daniel. I raised you better than that." Her voice cracked. "That woman is changing the country, and you're sitting in that house feeling sorry for yourself. What are you going to do about it?" "What can I do? She won't talk to me." "Good. She shouldn't. You don't deserve her time." His mother sighed. "But you could start by fixing yourself, by becoming someone who deserves success instead of someone who just takes it from others." After she hung up, Daniel sat in the dark house, her words echoing. The furniture Liana had chosen surrounded him. The curtains she'd hung. The garden she'd planted that he could see through the window, now overgrown and dying from neglect. This house was a tomb, a monument to his arrogance. He pulled up the real estate agent's number, typed out a text, "List the house. I'll take whatever I can get." 3 minutes later, "Understood. I'll prepare the paperwork. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this." Everyone was sorry. Everyone except Daniel, who was just numb. His phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made his blood run cold. "Final notice, business account overdraft." He'd bounced 3 checks. His business account was negative $8,000. He was broke. Actually, truly broke. The man who'd told his wife she was lucky to have him couldn't make his mortgage payment. Daniel opened his laptop, searched Liana's name one more time, and found her giving a speech at a women's entrepreneurship conference. "The people who tried to make me small did me the greatest favor," she was saying to thunderous applause. "They showed me exactly who not to become. They taught me that someone else's inability to see your value says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations." The camera panned across an audience of thousands, hanging on her every word. "I spent years trying to be enough for someone who would never appreciate me. Years shrinking myself to fit into a space that was never meant for me. And the day I stopped, the day I chose myself, that's when everything changed." Daniel slammed the laptop shut. She was right. About everything. And he'd lost her. Not just lost her. Destroyed any chance of ever having her respect again. He looked around the empty house, at the bills he couldn't pay, at the business crumbling around him, at the life he demolished in pursuit of shallow validation. This was his darkest hour. And somewhere across the city, in a gleaming office tower, Liana Anderson was building her empire without a single thought of the man who'd tried to bury her. The worst part? He deserved every second of this pain. And it was only going to get worse. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 weeks after the magazine article. Daniel stood outside the Anderson Infrastructure Development office building, having waited 3 hours for Liana to emerge. He'd been reduced to this, stalking his ex-wife like some desperate stranger, hoping for 5 minutes of her time. Security had thrown him out twice. Her assistant had threatened to call the police. Dr. Palmer had seen him in the lobby and told him to get professional help. But Daniel was out of options. His house was in foreclosure. The business was officially bankrupt. He'd moved into a studio apartment that cost $950 a month and still felt too expensive. His car had been repossessed. He took the bus now, the same bus system he'd once mocked Liana for suggesting they used to save money. Everything he'd built, everything he'd been proud of, was gone. And the woman he'd called worthless was everywhere he looked, succeeding beyond his wildest imagination. At 6 p.m., Liana finally emerged from the building, talking on her phone, laughing at something the person on the other end said. She wore a charcoal suit that screamed power, her natural hair in elegant twists, carrying a leather bag that probably cost more than his monthly rent. She looked like success personified. Daniel stepped into her path. She stopped, recognition flickering across her face, followed immediately by something that looked like pity. She said something into the phone and hung up. Daniel. Her voice was neutral, professional, like he was a stranger. You need to stop coming here. I've asked you repeatedly. I just need 5 minutes. Please, Liana. 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? How you threw me away. How you called me nothing. How you humiliated me and kicked me out of my own home. She shook her head. I know all of that already. I lived it. I was wrong. About everything. I see that now. Congratulations on your character growth. She moved to step around him. I have a dinner meeting. He grabbed her arm, desperate. Please. I'm losing everything. The house is in foreclosure. The business is bankrupt. I have nothing left. She pulled her arm free, and for the first time he saw anger flash in her eyes. And you think that's my problem? You think because you're finally experiencing consequences, I'm supposed to save you? I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to forgive me. Why? The question was genuine, curious. Why do you need my forgiveness, Daniel? Is it because you actually regret hurting me? Or because watching me succeed while you fail makes you feel small? The truth sat between them like a living thing. Both, he admitted. It's both. Something in her expression softened, just slightly. At least you're being honest. She checked her watch. You get 5 minutes. Say what you need to say. They sat on a bench outside the building, the city moving around them. Daniel struggled to find words big enough for the magnitude of his mistakes. I didn't see you, he started. For 8 years. I looked at you every day and never actually saw you. I saw what I wanted you to be. Someone who made me look good. Someone who supported my dreams without having any of her own. Someone who stayed small so I could feel big. Liana listened, her face unreadable. You tried to tell me about your work, about the proposal, about your ambitions. And I dismissed all of it because if you succeeded, what did that make me? His voice cracked. I was threatened by my own wife's potential. How sick is that? Very, she said quietly. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was too insecure to celebrate you. Too small to stand beside someone extraordinary. He looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time. And now you're exactly who you were always meant to be. And I'm exactly what I deserve to be. Nothing. You're not nothing, Daniel. Liana's voice was sad. You're just someone who confused cruelty with confidence. Someone who thought putting others down would lift you up. That's not nothing. That's just broken. Can you ever forgive me? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the traffic pass. I already have, she said finally. Not for you. For me. Because holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I forgave you so I could move forward. She turned to face him. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean we're friends. It doesn't mean I owe you anything. I know. Do you? Her eyes searched his face. Because you're here asking for my forgiveness like it's something I owe you. Like my emotional labor is still your right to claim. Even now, you're making your pain my responsibility. The truth of it hit like a hammer. You're right, he said. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone. He stood to go, and she caught his wrist. Wait. She pulled an envelope from her bag, handed it to him. Open it later. Not now. Then she stood, smoothed her suit, and walked away without looking back. Daniel sat on that bench for 20 minutes before opening the envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a note in her handwriting. Daniel, this is not because I owe you anything. This is because I refuse to let your financial crisis be my burden to carry emotionally. Consider this severance for the 8 years I spent building systems you benefited from. Use it to get back on your feet. Get therapy. Become someone better than who you were. But understand, this is the last time we will ever speak. The last time my resources will touch your life. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your second chance. I'm not your redemption arc. I'm simply someone who once loved you, who has now moved on, and who wishes you well from a great distance. Take care of yourself. Liana Daniel stared at the check, at the perfect handwriting, at the grace she was extending even when he deserved none of it.
$52,000.
Enough to catch up on debts, start over, build something new. She'd saved him, one last time, not because she had to, but because she could. And she'd done it with boundaries so clear they left no room for misinterpretation. This was goodbye, final and complete. He folded the check carefully, put it back in the envelope, and for the first time in months, cried. Not from self-pity, but from genuine remorse. From the devastating clarity of knowing exactly what he'd lost and why. Liana had been extraordinary the entire time. He'd just been too blind to see it. And now she was gone. Truly gone. Moving through a world he couldn't access. Building things he couldn't imagine. Becoming legendary while he faded into obscurity. He'd wanted her forgiveness. She'd given him something better. Freedom from his own worst impulses and a final gift he didn't deserve. Now he had to decide what to do with it. Across town, Liana sat in a restaurant with her leadership team, forcing herself to focus on the conversation about the project's Phase 2 implementation. Sam was there, having joined the company as general counsel. Dr. Palmer had come as an advisor. You okay? Sam whispered during a lull. You seem distracted. I saw Daniel today, Liana admitted quietly. Gave him the severance check. And I finally feel free. She smiled, genuine and bright. I don't love him. I don't hate him. I just don't feel anything. It's over. Really, truly over. Sam squeezed her hand. Proud of you. Me too, Dr. Palmer added, having overheard. That took remarkable grace. It took boundaries, Liana corrected. Grace would have been taking him back. Boundaries are knowing I deserve better and acting accordingly. Her phone buzzed. An email from the National Development Commission. Phase 2 approval granted. Additional $400 million in funding secured. Liana stared at the number. $400 million more. Over $1 billion total across both phases. She was building something that would outlive her, something that would change millions of lives, something her mother would have been proud of. And she was doing it without anyone trying to make her small. Good news? Dr. Palmer asked. The best, Liana said, and meant it. She'd started this journey invisible, dismissed, told she was nothing. She was ending it legendary. And the man who tried to bury her was finally, just a memory. 6 months later, Liana stood in front of the house Daniel had kicked her out of, watching construction crews transform it into something that mattered. She'd bought it for $850,000 cash. Daniel had accepted immediately, grateful for anything above foreclosure value. The sale had closed in 3 weeks. Now, the mansion was becoming the Margaret Anderson Center for Women's Advancement. The master bedroom where she'd cried over Daniel's cruelty would house a career counseling suite. The kitchen where she'd signed divorce papers would become a culinary training space. The garden she'd planted would host workshops on entrepreneurship and financial literacy. Every room that had witnessed her diminishment would now elevate other women. The irony was poetic. It's perfect, Sam said, standing beside her. Your mom would love this. She would. Liana smiled, watching workers install the bronze plaque beside the entrance. In memory of Margaret Anderson, who worked so others could rise. Now we rise together. Her phone buzzed. Secretary Cross. Ready for today's signing ceremony? The nation is watching. The official contract signing was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the National Development Commission. Media from 40 countries would be there. The president had agreed to make remarks. Liana would sign documents that would transform infrastructure in 73 underserved communities across 6 states. $1.15 billion total. The largest contract of its kind in American history. And she'd done it completely on her own merit. Ms. Anderson? One of the construction supervisors approached. There's someone at the gate asking to see you. Says his name is Daniel Laszlo. Liana's stomach tightened, but she nodded. Let him in. Daniel looked different. Thinner. Older. He wore a simple button-down and khakis. Took public transportation based on the bus pass she could see in his hand. His hair was graying at the temples. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said immediately. I just wanted to see what you're building, and to say congratulations. I saw the news about today's signing. Thank you. He looked at the house, at the construction, at the plaque. The Margaret Anderson Center. That's beautiful, Liana. Really beautiful. It's necessary, she corrected. Women need spaces that believe in them, that see their potential, that don't make them small. The implication hung between them. I'm in therapy now, Daniel said quietly, using the money you gave me to actually fix myself. My therapist says I have a lot of work to do around control and insecurity and how I treat people I'm supposed to love. That's good. I'm glad you're getting help. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect friendship. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. Who I was. His voice cracked. And I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. Liana looked at him. This man she'd loved, and felt nothing but distant compassion. I believe you, she said, and I hope you become someone better. For yourself, not for me. I know. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I tell everyone who'll listen that you're the most brilliant person I've ever known. That I was too stupid to see it. That you succeeded because you're exceptional. Not because of luck or timing or anything else. That is worth something, Liana acknowledged. Thank you. He walked away, and she watched him go without regret. Later, at the signing ceremony, Liana stood before cameras and dignitaries and the weight of history. She signed her name on documents that would change millions of lives, and the room erupted in applause. In the back of the crowd, Daniel stood watching, having bought the cheapest ticket available to witness her moment. He'd asked a reporter for a quote earlier, hoping to somehow be part of her story one more time. The reporter had asked, "What do you think about your ex-wife's success?" And Daniel, finally understanding, had replied, "I didn't lose her. I threw her away. That's something I'll regret for the rest of my life." The quote would run in tomorrow's paper, but Liana would never read it. She was too busy building the future to look back at the past. 2 years later, the Margaret Anderson Center had served over 3,000 women. Liana stood at the ribbon cutting for the third location, this time in her hometown of Detroit, watching women walk through doors that would change their lives. The infrastructure project was ahead of schedule and under budget. Communities that had been isolated for generations now had access to reliable transportation, connecting them to jobs, education, healthcare. The economic impact had exceeded projections by 40%. Liana had been featured in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People. Harvard Business School taught case studies about her leadership. Her TED Talk about rising from invisibility had been viewed 20 million times. She'd started a foundation funding engineering scholarships for women from low-income backgrounds. 50 students a year, full ride, named after her mother. And she'd met someone, a civil engineer named Marcus, who saw her brilliance from day one, who celebrated her success without feeling threatened, who understood that partnership meant elevation, not diminishment. Daniel had completed therapy, started a small consulting business helping other entrepreneurs avoid his mistakes. He'd remarried someone age-appropriate, had a daughter, posted occasionally about gratitude and second chances. He never mentioned Liana publicly again, understanding that her story was no longer his to tell. Vanessa's lifestyle coaching business had been shut down by the FTC. She'd moved to Arizona. The internet had forgotten her. But Liana had become unforgettable. As she cut the ribbon on the Detroit Center, reporters shouted questions about her next project, her plans for expansion, her vision for the future. She smiled, radiant and powerful, and said, "We're just getting started," because women who'd been called small, who'd been dismissed and underestimated and thrown away, didn't just survive. They became legendary, and legends never stopped building. Thank you for joining Liana's journey from invisible to indispensable. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own worth, please drop a comment below sharing your favorite moment. What hit you hardest? When did you cheer out loud? And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now, because I have so many more stories about people who rose from the ashes, who proved the doubters wrong, who became everything they were told they couldn't be. Remember, someone else's inability to see your value says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are exactly enough. Keep building. Keep rising. Keep proving them wrong by succeeding beyond their wildest imagination. Until next time, stay powerful. See you in the next story.